Have you ever made a mistake so catastrophic that it turned your entire world upside down? One moment of weakness, one slip of the tongue, and suddenly your life is unrecognizable. My name is Natalie, and I'm here to tell you the story of how my life fell apart overnight. It's a tale of love, betrayal, and revenge so ruthless it feels like a plot straight out of a thriller. But trust me, this is no fiction. This is my reality. Before we dive in, let me welcome you to Unheard Stories, where we share raw, unfiltered tales that will make your heart race and your jaw drop. If you love stories that reveal the messy, unpredictable side of human relationships, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. You won't want to miss what's coming next. Now, let me take you back to a time when I thought I had it all. My life looked perfect from the outside. I was 31 years old, working as a successful financial consultant, and married to Ethan, the man I believed was my soulmate. Ethan was everything I had ever wanted in a partner. Charming, intelligent, and deeply ambitious. We lived in a gorgeous home that seemed to echo with the promise of a bright future. Together, we had dreams of starting a family, of growing old side by side. We were the couple everyone admired, the couple I thought would defy all odds. But life, as I've learned, is never as perfect as it seems. Beneath the polished exterior of our marriage lay cracks that I chose to ignore. Ethan's job as a bank director demanded more and more of his time, leaving me alone in a home that once felt alive with love and laughter. I told myself that his dedication to work was for us, for the life we were building, but deep down, I was lonely, aching for the attention and passion we once shared. The worst part? I let that loneliness consume me. I made choices I can never undo, choices that shattered everything I held dear. And when the truth came out, Ethan didn't just confront me. He destroyed me in ways I could never have imagined. His revenge wasn't just personal. It was calculated, precise, and designed to leave me with nothing. And the person who helped him do it? Let's just say it wasn't a stranger. This story isn't just about betrayal. It's about the aftermath. It's about how one decision can spiral out of control, how love can turn into something unrecognizable, and how the people you think you know best can surprise you the most. So, buckle up because this ride is about to get wild. Natalie had always been ambitious, a woman who knew what she wanted and wasn't afraid to work for it. As a financial consultant, her days were meticulously planned, her calendar packed with meetings, client calls, and deadlines. She thrived on the satisfaction of closing deals, solving complex financial puzzles, and proving her worth in a male-dominated industry. But beyond her professional life, Natalie was a romantic at heart. She dreamed of a life filled with love, laughter, and the little moments that make it all worthwhile: sunset walks, Sunday mornings with coffee and books, and the pitter-patter of tiny feet in the home she shared with Ethan. Yet, beneath her driven, confident exterior was a woman who craved validation and the thrill of being truly seen. Loneliness began to creep into her life. The career she once adored started feeling like an escape from the growing silence at home. She wanted more than the spreadsheets and bank statements that filled her days. She wanted connection, passion, and the intimacy that once defined her marriage. Ethan, Natalie's husband of 4 years, was the embodiment of success. At just 31, he had already secured a prestigious position as a bank director, a role he had earned through sheer determination and intellect. His sharp suits and confident demeanor made him the kind of man who turned heads wherever he went. But Ethan wasn't just about appearances. He was deeply logical, thoughtful, and meticulous in everything he did. Their love story began like a scene from a romantic comedy. They met during a job interview at a high-profile financial firm, both nervously waiting in the same room. Natalie had been drawn to Ethan's calm confidence. The way his smile seemed to light up the room. After the interviews, a casual coffee turned into hours of conversation. What started as banter about work grew into something deeper, a connection neither of them had expected. Ethan was the kind of man who noticed the little things. He remembered Natalie's favorite flower, red roses, and would surprise her with them just because. He planned romantic getaways and whispered promises of a future filled with shared dreams. But as Ethan's career flourished, the demands of his work grew. Late nights and endless spreadsheets replaced the soft kisses and laughter that had once filled their home. Ethan's priorities shifted toward building a stable foundation for their future. A future he assumed Natalie understood and supported. Ethan was a perfectionist, driven by a desire to provide the best life for Natalie. He saw his relentless work ethic as a necessity, not realizing that with every late night and missed moment, Natalie felt herself slipping further into the shadows of their relationship. In the beginning, their marriage was everything Natalie had dreamed of. Ethan would wake her with soft kisses and leave love notes on the kitchen counter before heading to work. They'd spend weekends exploring new restaurants, laughing at each other's jokes, and imagining the children they would one day raise together. But over time, the rhythm of their lives shifted. Ethan became engrossed in his career, and while Natalie appreciated his ambition, it often left her feeling like an afterthought. Their once passionate nights became rare, and when Natalie tried to initiate intimacy, Ethan would often brush her off, citing exhaustion. The growing distance between them was subtle at first, like a faint crack in a pristine mirror. But as the months turned into years, those cracks deepened, forming a chasm that neither of them knew how to bridge. Their arguments, once rare and resolved quickly, became more frequent. Natalie wanted more attention, more time, and more of the Ethan she had fallen in love with. Ethan, on the other hand, couldn't understand why she wasn't satisfied with the life he was working so hard to build for them. It wasn't that they didn't love each other. They did. But love, as Natalie would later learn, isn't always enough to sustain a relationship. The unspoken resentments and unmet needs created a void, one that Natalie didn't know how to fill. And then there was Marcus. Natalie met Marcus during a rare night out with her girlfriends, one of the few times she allowed herself to escape the growing void in her marriage. The club was vibrant, the music loud, and for a fleeting moment, Natalie felt alive again. She laughed, sipped on her cocktail, and swayed to the beat, her friends pulling her into carefree joy. That's when she saw him. Marcus. He wasn't just handsome, he was magnetic. With sharp features, smoldering brown eyes, and a confidence that radiated effortlessly, he stood out in the crowded room. His presence was electrifying, the kind that drew every gaze. When their eyes met, a spark ignited, and Marcus smiled. A knowing, mischievous smile. Within moments, he approached her. "That dress looks like it was made for you," he said. His voice smooth and self-assured. Natalie's cheeks flushed, but she laughed it off, telling herself it was harmless. They began talking, though the music made hearing every word impossible. It didn't matter. The way Marcus looked at her, like she was the only person in the room, filled a void she hadn't realized had grown so large. They danced, their bodies moving in sync. His hands lingered on her waist, pulling her closer, and Natalie felt an energy she hadn't felt in years. Her heart raced as guilt flashed through her mind, but it was quickly drowned out by the thrill of the moment. When the night ended, Marcus asked for her number. Natalie hesitated, her thoughts briefly flashing to Ethan. But then the loneliness crept in again, and she gave in. She told herself it was harmless, just a bit of fun to lift her spirits. But as she walked away, her phone buzzed with Marcus's first text. "Can't wait to see you again." What started as innocent messages quickly spiraled into something far more dangerous. Marcus's texts were flirty, playful, and addictive. He made Natalie laugh, complimented her often, and reminded her of what it felt like to be desired. Their first coffee date was thrilling. It was broad daylight, but the secrecy of meeting someone other than her husband made her pulse quicken. Marcus was charming, effortlessly steering the conversation between light-hearted banter and deeper, more intimate topics. Over coffee, he revealed his own struggles. "I'm married, too," he admitted, his eyes soft with what seemed like vulnerability. "But things haven't been good for a while. My wife is pregnant, but honestly, we've grown apart." Natalie nodded sympathetically, feeling an unspoken connection in their shared dissatisfaction with their marriages. She told herself it was just coffee, just conversation, but a part of her knew it was more. One coffee turned into another. Then came dinners, then drinks at her apartment when Ethan was working late. Their first kiss was hesitant. It happened on one of those evenings, both of them lingering by the door as Marcus prepared to leave. He leaned in and Natalie froze for a moment. But when their lips met, it unleashed a flood of emotions, passion, longing, and guilt, all tangled together. From that moment on, there was no turning back. Their encounters grew more frequent, more daring. They met in hotel rooms, in his car, and even in the bed Natalie shared with Ethan. Every stolen moment was a high, fueled by the adrenaline of secrecy and the allure of forbidden passion. But with every kiss, every touch, every whispered promise, Natalie felt herself slipping further away from the woman she once was. The guilt came in waves, crashing over her in the quiet moments when she was alone. She would lie awake at night, staring at Ethan as he slept peacefully beside her, wondering how she could do this to him. He wasn't perfect, far from it, but he was a good man who had loved her deeply and worked tirelessly to give them a stable future. And yet, she couldn't stay away from Marcus. His attention was intoxicating, his touch like a drug she couldn't quit. Every time she tried to convince herself to end it, Marcus would send a text or call with his smooth, teasing tone, and her resolve would crumble. "I can't keep doing this," she told him one afternoon as they sat in his car. Marcus reached for her hand, his thumb brushing over her knuckles. "I feel the same way," he said, his eyes locking onto hers. "But I can't stay away from you. You make me feel alive, Natalie." His words unraveled her defenses, the connection between them too strong to ignore. At home, Ethan seemed increasingly distant, though he never voiced any suspicions. Natalie told herself that her affair was a symptom of their failing marriage, not the cause. "If Ethan just paid more attention to me," she rationalized, "if he made me feel special again, I wouldn't need Marcus." But deep down, she knew it wasn't that simple. The affair consumed her thoughts. Even when she was with Ethan, her mind drifted to Marcus. His laugh, his kisses, the way he made her feel desired. She began comparing the two men, resenting Ethan for not being more like Marcus. And yet the guilt lingered. It haunted her in the quiet moments, a constant reminder of the line she had crossed. Natalie knew she was playing a dangerous game, but the thrill was intoxicating, and she couldn't bring herself to stop. What she didn't realize was that Ethan wasn't as oblivious as she thought. He had started noticing her late nights, her unexplained bursts of joy, and the secrecy surrounding her phone. While she thought she was in control, the truth was that her carefully constructed facade was already beginning to crack, and when it shattered, the fallout would be catastrophic. Ethan had always been a methodical man, not one to jump to conclusions. But over the weeks and months, subtle changes in Natalie began to gnaw at him. She had always been sociable, but now her nights out seemed more frequent. The phone that once sat casually on counters and nightstands was now glued to her hand or hidden away. Natalie's demeanor shifted. 2 moments of uncharacteristic joy were followed by distracted silences, as though she were living in a world he couldn't see. One evening, he watched her smile at a message on her phone, her eyes lighting up in a way that felt unfamiliar. "What's got you so happy?" Ethan asked casually. Natalie's head snapped up, and she fumbled to lock her phone. "Oh, nothing. Just a funny meme from a friend," she replied, her laugh too forced, her tone too quick. Ethan nodded, his face impassive, but inside, doubt was taking root. The final straw came one evening when he glanced at her phone, and a message from someone named M flashed on the screen, followed by a winking emoji. Natalie noticed and snatched the phone with nervous laughter. "It's just work stuff," she mumbled, quickly tucking it into her pocket. That night, as Natalie slept beside him, Ethan lay awake, his mind racing. Something wasn't right. And if there was one thing Ethan knew, it was that the truth always found a way to surface. Ethan didn't confront Natalie immediately. Instead, he planned a romantic dinner, hoping to reconnect and subtly test his growing suspicions. He chose a quaint bistro that had once been their favorite, ordering Natalie's favorite wine. The atmosphere was cozy, and for a while, it felt like old times as they laughed and reminisced about their early days together. But Ethan, ever calculated, steered the conversation. "You've seemed so happy lately," he said, his tone light but probing. "It's nice to see you smiling again." Natalie hesitated, swirling her wine. "I guess I've just been enjoying life," she said vaguely, her eyes darting away. The wine kept flowing, loosening Natalie's guarded demeanor. By the end of the evening, her words became more careless. At one point, she laughed and said, "It's funny how much you can miss something until someone reminds you of it." Ethan's stomach tightened. "Someone?" he asked, his voice calm but his pulse quickening. Natalie blinked, realizing her mistake, but the alcohol had already clouded her judgment. "I just mean, like friends. People who make you feel alive." As they walked to the car, Natalie muttered under her breath, "It's no wonder I found other ways to feel appreciated." Ethan froze but said nothing, choosing instead to drive home in silence. Her words echoed in his mind, each syllable sharpening the blade of his suspicion. That night, as Natalie slipped into a drunken sleep, Ethan began to plan. He didn't want a confrontation, he wanted answers. Ethan wasn't impulsive. He was precise. Over the next few days, he began piecing together the puzzle. The first step was her phone. Ethan knew Natalie guarded it fiercely, but one evening, while she showered, he seized the opportunity. Unlocking it, he scrolled through her messages and found exactly what he feared. Texts from M, filled with flirtation and innuendo. Phrases like, "I can't stop thinking about last night," and "When can I see you again?" were undeniable proof. Ethan forwarded the messages to his email, ensuring he had evidence. Next, he decided to uncover who M was. Through subtle questioning, Ethan learned that Natalie often met her friends at a particular bar. One evening, claiming to be working late, Ethan parked outside that bar and waited. It didn't take long. Natalie arrived, dressed to kill, her eyes scanning the room. Minutes later, a man joined her. A tall, chiseled figure who exuded confidence. Ethan watched as they laughed, touched, and eventually left together. Ethan's fury grew as he realized the man was Marcus, a former acquaintance from years ago. The betrayal now felt deeply personal. Ethan wasn't content with merely confronting Natalie. He wanted her to feel the weight of her actions, to face the consequences of the trust she had shattered. He began by reaching out to Marcus's wife, Clara. They had crossed paths at his workplace before, and Ethan arranged a meeting under the pretense of discussing something professional. Over coffee, he revealed everything, showing her the messages and detailing what he had witnessed. Clara's reaction was immediate: tears, anger, and a determination to confront Marcus. "He's been lying to me," she whispered, clutching her stomach, "and I'm carrying his child." Together, Ethan and Clara devised a plan. Ethan would host a dinner, inviting both families and Clara. Natalie wouldn't suspect a thing. The night arrived, and Natalie was oblivious as Ethan guided her into the restaurant. The room was filled with familiar faces: her parents, his parents, Marcus, and Clara. Ethan stood, raising his glass. "Tonight is a special night," he began, his tone deceptively warm. "It's not often we get to gather with the people we love most." Natalie smiled nervously, glancing at Ethan. Something felt off, but she couldn't place it. "But tonight," Ethan continued, his voice growing colder, "there are two people here who know why this dinner is truly significant. Natalie and Marcus. Would you like to explain?" The room fell silent. Natalie's heart sank as Ethan pulled out his phone, reading aloud the damning messages she had thought were secret. Her parents stared in disbelief. Clara sobbed, her hand protectively cradling her belly. Marcus froze, his face pale. "And just so everyone knows the full extent of the betrayal," Ethan added, his voice steely, "these two weren't just meeting in secret. They had the audacity to do it in my home, in my bed." The room erupted into chaos. Natalie's father slammed his fist on the table. Her mother burst into tears, and Clara unleashed a torrent of rage on Marcus. Ethan turned to Natalie, his expression cold and unyielding. "You're no longer welcome in my home," he said. "Pack your things tonight." It was the beginning of Natalie's downfall, and Ethan's revenge had only just begun. The restaurant's warm lighting and upscale ambience were in stark contrast to the storm brewing beneath the surface. Natalie entered, her heels clicking on the polished floor. Her arm looped around Ethan's as they walked to the private dining room. She smiled politely, but unease settled in her chest when she saw the guest list. Her parents, Ethan's parents, Marcus, and a visibly pregnant Clara. Her heart raced. Marcus caught her eye briefly, but quickly looked away, his face pale. Natalie tried to dismiss her growing dread, telling herself it was a coincidence. But Ethan's icy demeanor made her palms sweat. As dinner progressed, Ethan stood and raised his glass. His voice was calm, almost too calm. "Tonight is a special night," he began. "It's not often we have the chance to gather with the people who matter most to us. But tonight, there's a deeper reason for this gathering. One that Natalie and Marcus can explain." The room fell silent. Natalie's breath hitched as all eyes turned to her and Marcus. "Ethan," she stammered, her voice trembling. "What are you talking about?" Ethan pulled out his phone, scrolling purposefully. "Let me help you. Here's a message you sent to Marcus last week. I can't stop thinking about last night. You make me feel alive in ways Ethan never could. Shall I continue?" Gasps rippled across the table. Natalie's mother clasped her hand over her mouth, tears brimming in her eyes. Clara froze, her face crumpling as her hand instinctively moved to her stomach. Ethan turned to Clara, his tone soft but no less cutting. "I thought you deserved to know, Clara. Marcus and Natalie have been sneaking around behind our backs for months." Clara's sobs broke the tension, her anguish spilling over. "How could you?" she screamed at Marcus. "I gave you everything, and this is what you do? While I'm carrying your child." Marcus reached out to her, but she recoiled as if his touch burned. "Don't you dare touch me," she spat. Ethan wasn't finished. "And just so everyone here knows the full extent of the betrayal, these two weren't just meeting in hotels or sneaking around like cowards. They had the audacity to do it in my home, in my bed." Natalie's father slammed his fist on the table, his face red with fury. "How could you do this to Ethan? To us?" he shouted. Her mother wept silently, unable to meet her daughter's gaze. Ethan's parents sat in stunned silence, their expressions a mix of pity and disgust. Natalie tried to speak, but no words came. Marcus sat frozen, his face drained of all color. Ethan delivered the final blow. "Natalie," he said coldly, "you're no longer welcome in my home. Pack your things tonight. And don't think for a second you're walking away with anything. I've already filed for divorce." Clara, her voice shaking, echoed the sentiment. "You're moving out tonight, Marcus. I don't care where you go. But you're not staying near me or this baby." The humiliation was total. Natalie and Marcus sat as pariahs, exposed and isolated as the people around them struggled to process the betrayal. The confrontation dinner was only the beginning of Natalie and Marcus's undoing. Ethan, with his meticulous planning, ensured the consequences of their actions reverberated through every aspect of their lives. Natalie returned to find herself locked out of their shared apartment. Ethan had already packed her belongings into a few hastily assembled boxes left outside the door. Desperate, she called her parents, but her father's voice was firm and unyielding. "You've embarrassed us enough, Natalie. You need to figure this out on your own." The financial fallout came next. Ethan's connections and influence ensured that her indiscretions became known at her workplace. Within days, Natalie was called into a meeting and terminated. "We value our reputation here," her boss had said, "and unfortunately, we can't afford the distraction this brings." Marcus faced similar consequences. Clara, armed with screenshots of incriminating texts, filed for divorce and full custody of their unborn child. She presented the evidence to his employers, ensuring his swift dismissal. Marcus was left jobless, homeless, and without the family he had so carelessly jeopardized. Natalie tried to reach out to Marcus in the days that followed, but he ignored her calls. The bond they had once shared, fueled by secrecy and excitement, now felt hollow. Neither wanted to confront the ruins of their choices. Natalie found herself in a dingy motel, the smell of stale air and peeling wallpaper a constant reminder of how far she had fallen. She spent nights scrolling through job listings, sending out resumes, and hoping for an opportunity. But rejection after rejection came back. Her reputation preceded her. The loneliness was crushing. She thought of Ethan, of the love they had once shared, and the home she had destroyed. She replayed the moments of her affair in her mind, trying to understand how she had let it spiral so far. Her phone buzzed once. A message from Marcus. "We should talk. Maybe we can get through this together." Natalie stared at the message for a long time before deleting it. She couldn't bear the thought of leaning on Marcus. He was a reminder of everything she had lost, a symbol of her mistakes. Days turned into weeks, and the motel became her prison. She had no home, no job, and no one to turn to. Each night, she lay awake, haunted by the faces of the people she had hurt. Ethan's cold stare, Clara's sobs, her parents' disappointment. Natalie had destroyed not just her marriage, but the trust and love of everyone who had once stood by her. And now, she was left to face the consequences alone. The days following the confrontation dinner were a whirlwind of chaos. But as the dust settled, Natalie found herself utterly alone. Her belongings, hastily packed into a few boxes, sat in the corner of a dingy motel room that now served as her home. The walls were cracked, the air stale, and the faint hum of traffic outside was her only companion. Natalie's financial situation crumbled quickly. Losing her job had been a devastating blow. She had built her career with determination and pride, believing it to be her safety net. But Ethan's influence ensured her termination. Every rejection email that followed felt like a slap in the face, a reminder of the reputation she now carried. Desperate, Natalie reached out to her parents, hoping for a lifeline. But their disappointment ran too deep. "We didn't raise you to destroy lives, Natalie," her mother said. "You need to take responsibility for what you've done." Her father was even colder. "This is a mess of your own making," he said firmly. "Fix it yourself." Her friends, once her support system, were no better. Many had distanced themselves after hearing about her affair, their polite excuses thinly veiled attempts to cut ties. One friend finally admitted, "I can't be associated with this, Natalie. It's too much." Each rejection, each closed door, chipped away at the confident woman Natalie had once been. She spent nights in her motel room staring at the ceiling, replaying the choices that had brought her here. Marcus wasn't faring any better. Clara, fueled by a mix of heartbreak and righteous anger, had filed for divorce and full custody of their unborn child. She made it clear that Marcus had no place in her or the baby's life. Clara's actions extended beyond the personal. Armed with screenshots of his messages and Ethan's support, she ensured Marcus's dismissal from his job. His once promising career was reduced to ashes. Now homeless and jobless, Marcus reached out to Natalie. "We need to talk," his message read. "Maybe we can help each other," but Natalie didn't respond. Marcus, once the escape she craved, now felt like a weight dragging her further into despair. She had no energy to relive the mistakes they had made together, no desire to bind herself to someone who symbolized everything she had lost. In the quiet isolation of her motel room, Natalie had little choice but to confront the truth. She had spent so long blaming Ethan's workaholic tendencies, his distance, and their strained intimacy for the void in her life. But deep down, she knew the fault was hers. "I thought I was filling a void," she wrote in her journal one night, tears staining the pages. "But all I did was create a bigger one." She began to see the ripple effects of her choices. Her betrayal had destroyed more than just her marriage. It had fractured her relationships with her parents, alienated her friends, and left Marcus's wife and unborn child in pieces. Natalie started therapy, hoping to untangle the web of decisions that had led her here. It was there, in the quiet vulnerability of those sessions, that she began to understand the deeper issues she had ignored for so long. Her craving for validation, her fear of confrontation, and her failure to communicate her needs with Ethan. Every step forward was slow, every day a challenge. She found a part-time job at a local cafe, a far cry from her previous position, but it was something. The routine gave her a sense of purpose, however small, and she clung to it as a lifeline. Still, the nights were the hardest. The silence of her motel room was deafening. filled with the ghosts of what could have been. She often thought of Ethan, of the life they might have shared if she had only spoken up, only tried harder to bridge the gap between them. Natalie's reflections weren't just about guilt, they were about growth. She realized that love isn't always about passion or excitement. It's about commitment, about weathering the storms together, about choosing to stay even when it's hard. I thought I deserved more, she admitted to herself. But what I really deserved was the chance to fight for what I had. Her regret wasn't just for what she had lost, but for the damage she had caused. Clara's tear-streaked face, Ethan's cold stare, her parents' disappointment. These were the images that haunted her. And yet, they were also the reminders of what she could never allow herself to do again. Natalie knew the road to redemption would be long, and forgiveness, if it ever came, might not be possible. But she promised herself one thing: to rebuild her life, piece by piece, and to live in a way that wasn't defined by selfishness and deceit. As I sit here and share my story, I know there will be judgment. I don't blame anyone for that. What I did was unforgivable. But if there's one thing I hope you'll take away from my story, it's this: infidelity isn't just a mistake. It's a choice, a selfish, destructive choice that has far-reaching consequences. I thought I could fill the void in my marriage by seeking validation elsewhere. I convinced myself I deserved to feel alive, to feel wanted. But all I did was destroy the trust and love that were the foundation of my life. My betrayal didn't just hurt Ethan. It rippled out, affecting my family, my friends, and Clara, who didn't deserve the pain I caused her. Infidelity doesn't just break relationships. It breaks people. It leaves scars that don't heal, even when time passes. If you're in a relationship and feel something is missing, please talk to your partner. Be honest about your feelings, your needs, and your struggles. It might be hard, but it's far better than letting silence and resentment push you into a decision you'll regret for the rest of your life. Today, my life is far from what it once was. I live in a small studio apartment, barely scraping by on a part-time cafe job. My once thriving career is gone. My relationships strained to the breaking point. My parents, while speaking to me again, still carry the weight of disappointment in their voices. As for Ethan, I don't think I'll ever earn his forgiveness, and I don't blame him. He's moved on and he deserves to. I'll always carry the pain of knowing I destroyed something so beautiful and precious. But despite everything, I've started to rebuild. Therapy has been a lifeline, helping me confront the choices I made and the person I became. I'm slowly learning to forgive myself, though some days are harder than others. There are nights when regret still keeps me awake, when I think about the life I could have had if I'd chosen a different path. But those thoughts remind me of the importance of the life I'm trying to build now. A life of honesty, accountability, and growth. I don't expect redemption, but I do hope to one day find peace. If you've made it this far, thank you for listening to my story. It wasn't easy to share, but I hope it serves as a cautionary tale. Life is messy, and we all face moments of weakness. But it's in those moments that we must choose the harder path, the path of communication, commitment, and self-reflection. Don't let loneliness or frustration drive you to actions you can't take back. Don't make the same mistakes I did. If stories like mine resonate with you, or if you want to hear more tales of love, betrayal, and redemption, please subscribe to Unheard Stories. Hit that bell icon to ensure you never miss an update. Take care of yourselves and the people you love. And remember, trust is fragile. Once broken, it's nearly impossible to repair. Let my story be the lesson you don't have to learn the hard way.